and welcome to the Homeschooling Global Summit 2020. I am here with Claus today, and he is the director of a wonderful, wonderful college that we also wanted to explore today, and it's called the College of Extraordinary Experiences. So, Claus, first, thank you very much for being here with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And let me introduce properly to Claus. Claus is the director of the College of Extraordinary Experiences, and he has extensive expertise and experience in designing different programs and working with children in education. So we're going to learn a lot about this today with him. Please, Claus, tell us a little bit about what's the College of Extraordinary Experiences.
So I think we're going to talk about two things today. One of them is the College of Extraordinary Experiences, which is our base and our company, and also an experience design professional development conference for adults from all sorts of industries. Basically, it's teaching people to think in experience design, whether they're lawyers or filmmakers or magicians or policemen. Now that's the college, and one of the projects that the college does is the School of Incredible Adventures. And I think that's what we really should talk about, because that's relevant for the whole homeschooling ecosystem.
Definitely. So please tell us about the school. This is the dream of many of us. So please tell us how it started. Why did you start it?
So first, let's start with the premise. And there's a premise that says that self-learning has never been easier or more powerful than it is today. Now, I turned 40 last year. And when I was a kid, if I learned something interesting or just got inspired by something interesting, then if I wanted to know more, that was pretty hard. I could ask my parents. My stepfather, who's a professor, would gladly explain anything and everything. My mother is a librarian, not exactly the worst people to ask, but their knowledge was, of course, limited to certain subjects. I could check out our home library. We had some books. It wasn't huge, but there were some books. So there were some encyclopedias, a couple of books on history, that sort of thing. I could check out the one Danish channel that in my childhood, there was only the one state TV run Danish channel, and then more happened in the 90s. But it wasn't easy to just find a documentary about volcanoes or an interesting film about Peru if I wanted to. I could go to a library, and with a librarian mother, that was easy. But again, that takes some effort. Now, I was fortunate. Many were not, but still, today it's a completely different picture. Today, if you want to know something, whether it's the most specific and esoteric thing ever, you pick up your phone. Most kids age 10, 11 have smartphones. You Google it and you'll find that there are YouTube videos with experts. There are documentaries available. There are articles. There's podcasts. There are ebooks you can read. There are people coming up with interesting facts left and right. So the first thing to say before we talk about what we actually do is it has never been easier to learn by yourself, no matter what your age is. However, that also means that for the younger generation of today, they're used to having everything at their fingertips. They're used to being able to Google everything, so they don't feel a need to know something before they need to know, because they don't need to be walking encyclopedias themselves like we did, and especially the people before us did. Now, what we're trying to do with the School of Incredible Adventures is we're trying to spark that desire for self-learning. We're trying to create those events that make them go, wow, I want to learn more about Greek democracy, or I want to know more about how the American political system works, or what's Russian railroad history. It doesn't really matter what the subject is. It matters that once you've sparked that desire for self-learning, then people can go on crazy journeys of discovery themselves. And we want to focus on that spark. Now, that was a very long intro without saying anything about what we actually do, which I'll explain now. But this was just to get
storytelling.
This was to get where we're coming from. And what we do is interactive stories. So imagine you have 6 children sitting in 6 different homes in front of their computers. and they're all linked up via Zoom connection with a storyteller. The storyteller is sitting somewhere else. The kids could be from Hungary. They could be from Spain. The storyteller could be sitting in Italy. There could be a kid from Ireland. It could be anybody and everywhere. Now, for each storyteller, there's an adventure. And the adventure could be about pirates. Let's just take pirates as an example, because this is something we've actually done. And the kids are thrust into this adventure as agents, time travel agents in training. So they're learning how to be time travelers, and that means they need to first test themselves by learning how to travel in fiction using the imagination. That's kind of the backstory, just to make an excuse for them being there. And then the storyteller will narrate the story, will basically tell them the story, except that they're the heroes of the story. So instead of just talking about what's happening, there's a beautiful pirate ship and the captain is angry and they've just assaulted a Spanish merchantman and now they're figuring out how to divide the loot. Then suddenly the storyteller turns to the kids and says, what do you want to do? Inspired by role-playing games, inspired by old interactive storytelling, inspired by campfires from thousands of years ago. It's collective storytelling, in this case, with a secret educational agenda. Because for the pirate adventure, just to stay with that example, the pirates are really bad at math. And the reason they don't really do a lot of good pirating is because every time they need to divide up the loot, they end up just killing each other instead. And suddenly the kids enter the scene and say, wait a minute, why don't you divide it so everybody gets an equal share, and maybe the captain gets a little bit extra, and maybe the navigator gets a bit extra. Whatever thing they come up with, which is essentially a math problem. Then the pirates say, oh, smart ones you are, come with us. You can also help us repair the sails. We have 18 pieces of mismatched cloth and we don't know how to make a sail. And suddenly the kids are solving a geometry problem inside the fiction. Now, this in itself has some possibilities. This sort of storytelling with a secret educational agenda, and having the kids not just listen to the story, but be part of it and make choices in it. Where it gets really interesting, we feel at least, is that we're also taking a physical dimension. So one of the challenges in the pirate adventure is that the pirate captain locks himself into his cabin because he's depressed and things aren't going his way. And the cook comes to the kids and says, well, I know what will get him out of there. He usually will come out if we make him a new nice drink, but I've run out of recipes. So you need to come up with a new drink for him. And then what the storyteller playing the cook says, go to your kitchens and find ingredients in your kitchens, your real life kitchens at home on the other side of the screen, mix a drink and come back and show me. So you have kids that go from sitting in front of the screen, being part of an adventure, getting a real life task, which is mixing a drink from colorful ingredients from their home, and then showing it to the storyteller via the screen. Now, whether you do, and then of course the cook chooses one of these drinks to be the most colorful and says, okay, I'll take this one and I'll take it to the captain. And miraculously, the captain is happy. And then they go on to the next scene. So it's a mix of storytelling, using, of course, technological aid, using images and music and sound effects, and real life tasks, whether it's drawing a map or doing a dance or mixing a drink or something else. That's the core of the School of Incredible Adventures. And I know this was a very, very long explanation. I normally try to do things a lot faster. So now I'll shut up and let you ask questions and try to be pointed with the answers. Thank you so far.
That's amazing. I felt I was transported to the world of the adventures. So thank you so much. That was a beautiful introduction, and that made me understand much better what's behind what you have created. And I wanted to go to that aha moment where you thought, why don't we do this? How did that happen? I would like to understand when in your career you decided that this was actually something that made sense.
So for that, we need to rewind a little bit. We need to rewind 6 or 7 years at least to my previous company, which was a role-playing company. And we used role-playing as a tool for teaching, for educating both adults and kids, and also for entertaining. So we teach kids about history or about bullying or about something else using role-playing as a tool. And we do it with adults as well. And at some point, we mostly did live events, but we talked about, could we do something via the internet? And the first thing people think when they go internet and digital is they take out the human element because then it can scale. And we didn't want that because we think that the human interaction has something to it. There's some level of what do you call, of creativity, of improvisation that you simply cannot get with something digital because the options you have need to have been decided in advance. That's a longer discussion. Whatever, back to the story is we looked at it and we found this is interesting. We can do something like this. It'll have a good educational angle, but we couldn't crack the problem of the size of the classroom. Because if you do this one storyteller with 25 kids, then it's suddenly interactive for the few that are loud, and for most it's passive.
Yeah.
So you need to have a small group. And if you have one storyteller or one teacher for 5 or 6 kids, then it becomes economically unsustainable. And that's where we left it then. And now we picked it up because of Corona, and we were part of, some of us were part of the EU versus virus hackathon. Mm-hmm. And we realized that this is something that we need to think about. And maybe the simplest way to crack that problem is simply to raise the price and look at it not as much as a cheap educational experience, but as a reasonably priced entertainment with educational aspects experience.
Mm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
It's a very simple answer, but it's also the best one we've come up with, because this cannot beat, for just dollar for dollar, this cannot beat classroom teaching. However, maybe if we can rethink classrooms or do it as a supplement to classrooms, then maybe it becomes possible.
Hmm. Yeah, how is it going so far? How many stories do you have out there?
So we just started, and we're doing 2 things right now. One is we're creating a bunch of adventures for anyone and everyone, just for the consumer market as it is. And we've started that already. And in collaboration with a Danish foundation, with a Danish nonprofit, Rollespilsfabrikken, which I've been part of for many years, we're creating some adventures based on entrepreneurship supported by a Danish foundation. So we also have the advantage that we have some strong partners in the nonprofit space where there's some people overlap. So we get to do stuff there as well. And I can say that we've already had our first repeat customers. Even for the second session, we had a repeat customer, which was pretty nice. Yeah. So right now we're recruiting people. We are looking into potential partnerships where we're testing out and figuring out what are some of the weak spots and what are some of the strong spots and what are some of the things that we thought we knew and turned out we didn't. For example, we've had to cut down the time of each adventure from 3 hours to slightly less, because for our target age group, which is mainly the 8 to 10-year-olds, that's a little bit too long, especially when there's so much screen time involved.
Yeah.
And so we're right now very much in the startup phase, but hopefully, and this is something that I tell our freelancers when we onboard them, hopefully we're not only just going to see people who say, oh, that's an interesting idea and get into contact with us. What I really hope for us to see is to see 1,000 copycats before the year is out. I want people to look at what we're doing and say, these guys have a great idea, but I could do it so much better, or cheaper, or differently, or for the Portuguese audience, or whatever it is they will. And then say, let me do it. Because what we want to do is not just create a company, we want to create a movement. Because at the end of it all, we think that education needs to be disrupted. And this is one of the ways it can be done. And if we're just doing that alone, we're never going to get anywhere. But if we suddenly have a lot of people copying us or being inspired by us, or just, or even saying, you guys are doing it wrong, but doing something similar, then we're happy.
I'm glad to hear that. I was wondering, why are you focusing on 8 to 10-year-old?
So our original focus was 8 to 13-year-olds because I have a ton of experience with working with that particular age group for live events, because that's a pretty broad age group and you can squeeze them into live events and it still makes sense. Now, one of the first things we found was that while this works for a live experience, it doesn't really work that well for a digital one, because the difference in age and maturity and interaction patterns just becomes more different when you're in front of a screen. And that's why we split it. And while the 11 to 13-year-olds are also interesting, just as adults are, we need to start somewhere.
Yeah.
So it's mainly a matter of when they're that age, they're old enough to have the English required. Right now we're starting in English because that means we can be international. And they have the imagination and the abstraction level, because if you work with a 4 or 5-year-old, then it's tricky, especially if English is their second language. On the other hand, they're still playful and they're still open to doing something that's a bit weird. Where I think if you take a 16-year-old, there's less chance that they'll run to the kitchen to mix a fizzy drink for the fake pirate captain in the screen. Now take a 32-year-old and they'll do it happily. But there's something in with working with teenagers that they're struggling so much with finding their own identity that sometimes they need to have a bit of safety, and that means not being too ridiculous. Now, once this catches on, which we hope it will, we may look at completely different things. And we also hope to be doing adult education using this, because the method is no different and we've had good test results so far. But we're starting with the kids. And also, and this will for some of our listeners who are very much into homeschooling, they'll be able to recognize this. It's much easier to get parents to make good decisions on behalf of their children than on behalf of themselves. And now it seems we have an extra guest on the interview. Hello, Sarah. Come here.
Hey,
This is my daughter who's just woken up from her nap.
One of the pirates. Hello.
Yes.
Welcome
Hello.
to the interview. Gorgeous kid.
Thank you.
So how did she inspire all this? I'm sure that once you're the father, you also start thinking more about these things. I was gonna ask you, is your own experience with your daughter of telling stories and trying to
I could pretend it was, because it'd make for a great story, and I could spin a lovely yarn about how my own fatherhood is made. But the reality is, I've worked with kids and experience design and education in some sort of combo since I was in my late teens. So this is something I've done before in many different forms, and this is just the newest one. And I'm sure that, yes, I could say it had something to do with Saga. It really doesn't. It's much more to do with Corona and to do with needing to pivot, because let's be honest and say that when the virus hit us, it destroyed our business. Yeah. It meant for me personally that my pipeline, it suddenly said 0 April, 0 May, 0 June. So we needed to rethink, and we needed to rethink fast.
Wow. Yeah. That is,
but we can pretend that it's because of Saga. That's maybe good enough.
That would make it a great story too.
Exactly.
So I was going to ask you, how do you look for the storytellers? So
we're a little bit lucky. We're lucky in many ways, but one of the ways in which we're lucky is that we have a huge network, and our network, our combined networks especially, is tapped into a lot of other networks. And that means that we just put up a post saying we're looking for storytellers and write us if you want to know more. And so far we've onboarded the first 30 or so.
Okay.
Which it doesn't mean that we right now have enough that we need 30, but we'd much rather create a team and kind of create a stable of storytellers. And then when we need to scale fast, then we have a core team to do that. And before this, I worked in my previous professional life, I've worked with up to having like 150, 200 freelancers in like a stable of freelancers. And that model works really, really well, as long as you're transparent with people and they know what's going on. So that's, it's been very easy for us to recruit so far.
Tell us a little bit more about your experience in past projects with children. I'm very interested in knowing how you're applying previous experiences to the pedagogical part of the project, right? Because I think that secret agenda of what you want them to learn um, needs to come from somewhere. And I would like to know, where is that? Where does it come from?
Yeah, so there's sadly it's in Danish, so it won't mean anything to a lot of people, but there's a 2004 book called Role Playing for Children and Adults, published in Denmark, that is basically a how-to guide for how to use role-playing as a teaching and pedagogical tool. And to me, that book has been pretty damn important, especially because I was one of the writers of it.
Yeah, so you've written quite a lot of books. I was wondering, I'm pretty sure.
It's ironic that I don't really like writing, and I've written 29 books, most of them on somehow related to interactive experiences, learning, design in some way or the other. And
Great.
what that means is that when I dropped out of my philosophy studies at the university, I started doing role-playing as a career, and nobody did that at the time, or some people did, but it was pretty rare, especially the live-action role-play, dress up in costume and pretend to be an orc or an elf or a pirate sort of thing. And especially in the beginning, it was easier to get to work with children. So my former company, which is still running, just not with me as an active part of it, has worked with libraries, with museums, with schools. We've done children's birthdays. We've done content that is very high on the entertainment scale, but also that's very high on the educational scale. And I've been one of the pioneers in that space globally since, a little bit before 2004. We had to learn something before we wrote the book, but so this is, for me, this is just continuing on a path that I was on for a long while. And then I met Paul, one of the co-founders of the college, and we started going to the broader realm of experience design. But for many years, I was a live action role play producer and designer and educator. And for me, this is just using some of those tools, but in a different context, because online role playing is there already. There are people playing Dungeons and Dragons over the internet. The big difference we have here is that we're taking away the game part. We're taking away the rules and the complexity, and we're putting in the educational aspect as something that's embedded into it. But what we're doing is it's not new. It's just packaged differently and aimed at a different audience. And I think the true secret to a lot of successful innovation is don't go inventing the wheel, because that's hard. Figure out who already has the wheel and where you can use it.
Especially if you need to execute fast, right?
Exactly. And then you can build on traditions. You just need to be good at translating. And that's what I see myself as, is I'm a translator of ideas. And that's one of the strengths, is finding out how to take something that is very well known in one space and taking it to a new space. And that's also the philosophy behind the whole College of Extraordinary Experiences. It's combining people from different industries, different walks of life, different countries, and getting them to talk together.
I was going to ask you to walk us through how would it work for someone that is interested in having their kids participating in this, because we are going to have families watching this, and I would like them to have a very clear picture of how does it work, when are these sessions happening, how could they enroll, how does it logistically work?
So we can do something easily, because we right now have the power of technology, also the power of a child who wants to take over the agenda here. So adventures.school is our website, and there it says when are the next sessions, what adventures are available. There's a small video describing the concept. There's an easy way to reach out to us. There's some description of what it is and where it comes from. All that jazz is up and running and available. There's even like a frequently asked questions.
Yeah, I can see
And
here the pirate adventure, few sessions coming up, and yeah, you have even several sessions scheduled. So anyone, I see it's during the weekends, is it?
yes, we found that
Okay.
it's easier during the weekends. And it's important to understand that our kind of open platform, the web page, is not really full, because the real, now we're getting bird noises from the phone. Thank you, Saga. The real secret here is not to have a platform that reaches everybody. The real plan for us is to partner with learning institutions, with corporations that do corporate childcare, with nonprofits. So we're not selling and producing one session at a time, but 100 sessions at a time, or 1,000 sessions at a time. Because if we just looked at one session, just the coordination work that goes into something like that, and here we're not even talking about design or paying the storytellers, it means that the price would have to be ridiculously high. So right now, the price we have on the website, which is 40 euros for a session, is nowhere near covering our costs. But it's just to showcase what it is we do and delight a few souls while we're looking at these bigger partnerships. And sometime in the future,
also, yeah.
Yeah, and sometime in the future, when we're up and running 100 sessions a day, then we can have digital infrastructure, and then things may make sense. And now you're talking. Yes, you're getting 2 interviewees here for the price of 1. But I think we're hitting one of the interesting Corona things right on the nail, which is that having kids at home while trying to work is not super easy.
Definitely, but it's very appropriate that we have your kid in this talk. So
yes, you're being very appropriate, Saga.
Yeah. I was gonna ask you, what do you need right now? What's kind of your bottleneck in this new initiative, so we can also reach out for help?
So what we need right now, or what our dream partner is right now, is a corporation or a institution of some kind that is willing to take a chance and try out this and say, we want 100 sessions, or we want 500 sessions. And whether it's something where we need to develop something for them specifically, let's say that General Motors says, this sounds interesting. We'd like to use this as a way of teaching the kids of our employees what their parents do. Can you create 3 adventures that are about that? And I'll say, sure, of course we can. Then let's talk with your experts, and we'll hook them up with our writers and artists. And then after that, we'll take that with our storytellers. And within a couple of months, all of the kids of employees of General Motors will know what their parents do and be proud of it. And this is just an example. If anybody from General Motors is listening, you are more than welcome to reach out. But this is just to give an example. That we're looking for somebody who can see this format in a way where they think, that would benefit us. And of course, the more we go out there and the more people we talk to, the more we'll find out how is this sold, how is it packaged, who does it benefit, who do we serve. Right now, we know what we do, and we know it has enormous flexibility because it's just a format. Yeah. But we don't know who we serve yet. Are we going to be working with schools? Maybe. Are we going to be working with governmental institutions? What subjects are we going to tackle? Are we going to tackle the ones where nobody pays attention? Is this like a STEM supplement for underprivileged kids in inner city schools? Or is this something to teach teenagers about how democracy functions? We don't know. It could go either way. But that's something we're going to discover on the journey.
Exciting journey ahead. Yeah.
Exciting. Yes.
I was going to ask you, what has this experience so far taught you about this new format? So what have you discovered so far?
So the first thing we've discovered, and this is direct feedback from the first session we did, is the more physical, the better. Because I come from this role-playing background. When I was a teenager, we'd sit in somebody's basement and pretend to be heroes slaying dragons and defeating orcs and looting old tombs of valuable artifacts. And we do it all with our voices and with our minds and with a few dice rolls. Sometimes there might be a bit of artwork involved if the storyteller, the dungeon master, would say, you meet a dragon, here's what it looks like, and show us something from a book. But we didn't even use background music then. That was too technologically advanced for us. And we certainly never thought of doing any of the tests our characters did physically. So our storytellers then never said, build a human pyramid in the room, or demonstrate with using these 8 chocolate coins how you want to put out a trap for the goblin chieftain. And here, when it's so easy to design something where you're just stuck in front of a screen. But I think the really good thing we've had here, and that came from a parent, was that we really need to not just do a little bit of physical activity, we need to do a lot of that. And it's resonated very, very well, both with our storytellers and with the kids who've been involved. Even such a simple thing like draw your own pirate flag, or draw your own fake treasure map. Again, a thing from the pirate adventure. Because of course, if you're going off to get the treasure, you need to get the other pirates off your trail by spreading fake pirate treasure maps. Makes sense. Yeah. So you let the kids draw them, not on a screen in a program, even though that would be free and simple, but you let them draw them physically on a piece of paper and show that to the webcam. And I think there's a whole range of possibility we haven't even gotten into. One of the things that I look forward to trying is, imagine that you have a story and suddenly it starts raining. And the storyteller can see you, can see your face and a little bit of the room you're in on the webcam, but that's about it. So when you're told that you need to find shelter and suddenly you're making a tent out of your blanket or you're crawling under a table to get away from the rain, and the storyteller also puts on some rain sound effects, then you're immersed, then you're engaged. And there's a whole bunch of that where we've only begun to scratch the surface. And I can see you're now looking for a place to crawl under because the rain is coming.
I was actually imagining those kids that generally used to play those kind of games at home with their friends, and suddenly they find that there is a way to keep doing that even if they are distanced. So yeah, I was thinking that it really does make sense because it's a need and something that you're not changing an habit, you're just continuing it in a different format.
Exactly.
So
and I think there's a thing that I've forgotten to mention, but that's also very much part of our philosophy on this and on the underlying reasons for this, is that globalization, internationalization, the idea of Europe, for example, is under attack right now. Mm-hmm. We've seen Brexit happen. We've seen an America that's increasingly looking inwards. And this COVID hasn't exactly made it much better. But for us, one of the most powerful ways to become a global citizen is by growing up having friends in different places. And of course, there's no guarantee that just because you go on a pirate adventure with a kid from Hungary and one from Greece and one from Scotland, if they get out of there, then you're going to be more positive towards those countries. But there is a chance. And that chance rises the more you get into contact with other human beings. As a kid of the 80s and 90s, if I wanted to meet foreigners, I needed to meet them on vacations, or they needed to have moved to Denmark. I'm lucky enough that I spent a couple of years in the US as a kid, and that meant I was in a class with Russians, with people from China, with people from the Philippines. There was a Polish guy who became my best friend, and that gave me an international outlook, even as a kid, because I'd been exposed. And if we can create something that makes it easy for a child in Morocco to play with a child in Brazil, led by somebody who's sitting in New York, then we're not doing something bad, at least.
Claus, this has been an amazing conversation. I have learned a lot I was wondering that a lot of things, well, you were talking about how kids' lives are going to be transformed due to this, and how we can keep making it interesting with the tools we have. So thank you very much for participating in the summit. And please, if anyone has a 8 to 10 year old kid, check adventures.school, is it?
Adventures.school.
And yeah, please come back and tell us in a few months how this is evolving, because definitely it's going to be a really, really exciting journey. Congrats.
Thank you.